Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about pollution in Delhi. There are three major reasons as to why there is increasing pollution in Delhi. What are those? One is stubble burning, second is thermal power plant, and third is Delhi's location. First, let us try and understand about stubble burning. We have discussed on this very platform and also in our preliminary discussion about stubble burning as well. One of the key parameters that we also have to look at is why stubble burning started increasing after 1970 and it started increasing after 2005. That is what is the discussion about stubble burning. Why? Because the earlier discussions have already taken place, but our key focus is with respect to the Green Revolution and also the Narega. These are the unintended consequence which is leading to pollution in the National Capital Region. Let's assume this before 1970 and much prior to that as well. Yes, there was pollution in Delhi and in and around that particular region as well. But what increased pollution is Green Revolution. Why? Because let's take the example of Punjab or let's take the example of Haryana. Was rice being grown in this particular region before 1970? Yes, there might be, but this was limited in scope. But after Green Revolution, there was vast expanse of land where rice was started growing, and ultimately what resulted in this what is called as stubble burning because of Green Revolution. So the Green Revolution became an indirect part of adding pollution to the National Capital Region. So up until 1970 we did not have so much of area where rice was being grown, but after 1970 when Green Revolution was introduced, because it was a profit crop, that is why stubble burning started increasing in this very region. Then we also have an unintended consequence of Narega as well. Let me explain this for you. This was introduced in the year 2005. So what exactly happens before 2005? There were couple of people, there were many people who were moving from Bihar and they were moving from Uttar Pradesh, let's say to Punjab and Haryana. So what you have is laborers working in the fields of Punjab. But 2005 you have one of the important and landmark schemes introduced by the UPA government, and that is called as Narega. So what exactly Narega does? It guarantees the residents of rural districts in India something called as the employment opportunities. It provides a work as well. It guarantees them work as well. So what do these people do? All those farmers or the laborers who are working in farm areas in Punjab started going back to their villages. This can be in Bihar, this can be in Uttar Pradesh as well. So getting laborers in Punjab and Haryana became a costly affair. Since it became a costly affair in Punjab and Haryana, what do the landowners do? What do the original farmers do? What do the owners of this particular land do? Because they were not able to get the laborers and because the cost of paying these laborers was comparatively costly, what exactly happens is this results in stubble burning. So kindly remember, now farmers in Punjab and Haryana who own the land have to pay higher wages to hire laborers to harvest their crop and to remove the residue as well. In this particular backdrop, instead of paying them high labor costs, what do? They burn all the stubble that which is present in Punjab and Haryana. So these are the two important parameters that you have to remember. One is the Green Revolution did also make an impact, and Narega, which happens to be an indirect consequence of Narega, happens to be stubble burning as well. These two are important points when it comes to the stubble burning. The second major factor which is contributing to pollution in Delhi is the thermal power plants within 300 kilometers of Delhi. Look into this particular image. It shows that there are many thermal power plants in and around Delhi as well. This means the pollution that is created by these thermal power plants is too huge in number, and that is resulting into pollution in the National Capital Region, that is Delhi. So kindly remember, one is the stubble burning, the second is the thermal power plant which is present in and around Delhi, which is adding to pollution in the National Capital Region. The third important factor is what we call as Delhi's location. Let's take the example of Chennai, or let's take the example of Mumbai as well. All these cities also have huge manufacturing sectors as well. Let's take the example of Chennai and its surrounding district. It is also called as India's automotive capital as as well. There are number of heavy vehicles, motorbikes, tractors that are manufactured in Chennai. But what is not impacting Chennai is because of its coastal region. So when you look at Chennai or when you look at Mumbai, what they have is the coastal city. But where is Delhi located? It is located interland. So what exactly happens? You have the wind, sea breeze that steps in and takes out all the pollution to the water. So this pollution that is present in the land is taken away by the sea breeze. So even if it is polluted, what is getting polluted is the ocean water. But here, since the land is present in Delhi, which is continental type of climate, what we have is all the wind that is present in that particular area. So what exactly happens? Because we have Chennai, because we have Mumbai, which have seas next to them, this is comparatively mitigating the issues when it comes to the pollution, and that is not the same when it comes to the national capital region. Also remember, when it comes to the westerly or the northwesterly winds, it also brings pollution from the regions of Pakistan, from the regions of Punjab, and also pushes it to the national capital region. So what we have is the westerly and the northwesterly winds as well. These are some of the factors which contribute to increasing pollution in the national capital region. Why are we discussing this? Before the COVID-19 hit, Delhi was called as the gas chamber. Why? Because of the suffocation, because this particular region had lot of incidents of health hazards as well. That is because of the suffocation created by the air pollution. Then COVID hit us all very badly. But one thing that positive happened was that this particular region also started witnessing a drop when it comes to the air pollution. Why? Because the transportation sector was low, the manufacturing activities were comparatively less, people were not using their private vehicles, and this actually brought down the pollution in the national capital region. But now, since there is unlocking of the economy, since we have opened up everything, there is increasing pollution as well. In this particular backdrop, what this article suggests is some of the recommendations as to how we would be able to cut down the pollution and bring up some mitigating measures so that this can actually control the pollution in the national capital region. This includes some of the steps taken by the Delhi government, and these will have to be followed going forward, says the author of this article. So what are these steps that we may have to initiate? First, we have to run a campaign in cutting down the deadly smoke from the thermal plants. We did discuss the thermal power plants is a major cause of pollution as well. So if we are able to reduce the pollution, cut certain amount of pollution that is resulting from these thermal power plants, we would be able to reduce the pollution in Delhi. And at the same time, the government of Delhi will also have to interact with the state governments of Punjab, interact with the state governments of Haryana, make sure that stubble burning does not happen in this particular place. So chemical treatment of stubble burning will also have to be initiated as well. And at the same time, the most important of all is with respect to the transportation sector as well. What exactly that we have to do? The first part is stricter enforcement of all the emission norms as well. In case people are violating some of the emission norms, then penalties will have to be imposed on all these people who have been violating the emission norms. The second important mitigating strategy is use of public transport. What exactly may happen? We have number of people who may start using the private vehicles. Why? Because we are witnessing the COVID-19 times. So the government should make sure that all precautions are taken, they are periodically sanitized, and they should also prevent the private vehicles as well. In fact, we have the Supreme Court of India which had also suggested that metro services will have to be increased during these testing times. And at the same time, if it is possible, we also have to make sure that there is increasing odd even formula as well. This was what Arvind Kejriwal government had come up with, which was an innovative idea where you have odd vehicles on one day, you have even vehicles on one day, but there are exceptions that are given. These exceptions that are given will also have to be minimized as well. So what we have is private vehicles restricted, increasing use of metro, and third is with respect to enforcement of odd even formula. The Delhi government also came up with the electric vehicles policy as well. This has to be enhanced, this has to be supported, and this has to be augmented as well. And the government in this particular case will also have to provide more subsidies so that people shift towards electric vehicles rather than using the vehicles which run on fossil fuel. So going forward, we require all the governments, the center, the state and the local governments stepping in together. They bridge, they coordinate and make sure that pollution in the national capital region is comparatively reduced. And at the same time, citizen participation becomes the most important factor. The civil society and the NGO should be giving some awareness about the health impact of the pollution as well. Only when people know about the pollution is when they would be able to initiate an action plan. So bringing an awareness to the people as well as to the civil society by the NGOs will become another important factor, and all the data and statistics from the Central Pollution Control Board will have to be taken, and the same will also have to be decimated, and health information should also be given to the people of National Capital Region. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says government moves to spur demand. What is the context? The finance minister has now announced two important measures to give a boost to the economy. This can be broadly classified into two different compartments. One is what is called as consumer spending. The other is what is called as capital expenditure scheme. What is this consumer spending? Basically, when the COVID-19 hit us abruptly, what we had was the government of India imposing the lockdown. During the lockdown, we had the government take couple of steps, but what also resulted was there was crunch when it comes to the supply, but there was excessive demand. But then the government also opened up the economy. There was unlock that happened with respect to economy. Now what we have is increasing cases of supply, but the demand in the market has dropped down. Why? Because people are not spending. Why? Because the people are not purchasing the products, and that is where we have excessive supply in the market, but the demand has gone down. In order to make sure that they can ignite this particular demand in the market, the government has come up with what is called as consumer spending. So what is this consumer spending? We all spend such that the demand increases and is able to meet commensurately when it comes to the supply. The first important scheme under the consumer spending is what is called as leave travel concession cash voucher scheme, and that is in specific reference to the central government employee. So what is this leave travel concession? As the very name denotes, it is leave travel concession. Let's say for example there is a central government employee. If he wants to travel to the destination of his choice and his hometown, or two times to his hometown, that is what is called as leave travel concession, where the government of India would be providing this particular person some concession when he is traveling. Is it given every year? The answer is a no. This is given once every 4 years, and currently it is for the period 2018 up until 2000. So who are it given to? Let's say for example there is a person who is working with the government of India. His spouse and two children will be given this leave travel concession. So what is it? Let's say if they have to travel by rail, or let's say they have to travel by the aircraft, in all these cases for traveling to the destination of their choice and hometown once or two times to their hometown, they would be provided this concession. So what is this concession? Let's say for example there is this particular person who happens to travel from Bangalore to Delhi. So this person would be provided, let's say, about 4,000. So there are about 4 people who are traveling, that person, spouse and two children. So this will become about 16,000. So this 16,000 will be provided by the government of India according to their slab and according to the salary. This might not be for every person, but in case there is a person who is earning 10 lakhs, there will be a fixed slab. So this concession will be according to the slab. Or in case there is a person who is earning about 20 lakhs per annum, it can change as well. So this concession is on the basis of the salary. So what exactly happens on the yearly basis? It is not given, but once every 4 years we have this concession given to an employee who is working with the government of India. But what is the concern here? Since it is COVID-19 period, there might have been few people who would have planned to go in 2020, or they might have planned to go in 2021. But since COVID COVID-19 has hit us, there are a couple of people who might have apprehensions and fear, and they might not travel as well. That is the primary reason the government of India has now come up with using this particular cash as a cash voucher scheme. So what do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, for a period of 4 years, this is just a hypothetical numbers, this person might have a travel concession of about 50,000. So if this person has a travel concession of 50,000, this can be converted into a voucher. So this voucher will be given by the government of India, and this person can use this 50,000 to buy any of the consumer products. But here is a small catch. He would not be able to spend it on everything and anything, but he can only buy the goods and services worth 3 times this particular fare, which means there is a particular product, and this particular product should be 1,50,000 in number, which means in case the travel concession given is 50,000, then the product value should be about 1,50,000. In case the concession given to that particular person is about 20,000, then the product value should be about 60,000. And also remember, such product buying will have to be only from the GST registered sellers. Why? They will be getting a copy, they will be getting an acknowledgement. This acknowledgement should be given to the government of India, and only then reimbursement takes place. And also remember, when it comes to the GST, they can buy the products only which has a slab of 12% or more. Let's say, for example, we have the GST slab of 5%, we have the GST slab of 12%, we also have the GST slab of 18%. In case that particular person is buying a product which is 5%, such product cannot be bought, but instead a product which has a GST of 12% and more, which can also be 18%, only such product can be bought about from this cash voucher scheme. So kindly remember, when this particular money is taken by the central government employee, this will become completely tax free. But in case he can still keep it up, but if he is withdrawing this money, there will be taxes that are imposed, says this cash voucher scheme. This is the first important scheme. The second important scheme is what is called as the Special Festival Advance Scheme. Till 6th Pay Commission, there was something called as the Festival Advance Scheme. Let's say there is one of the festivals that is coming, Christmas, or it can be Ganesh Chaturthi, or Deepavali, or Ramzan, any of these. In case there is a non-gazetted officer who happens to be from Group C or D, then such person was getting an advance scheme, which means if there is a festival, the government used to pay about 4,500 earlier to this particular person so that he can pay in the near future as part of the installments. This was actually ended when 7th Pay Scale Commission was introduced. It was present up until the 6th Pay Commission to all the non-gazetted officers, but this is again being introduced by the government of India. This will be a one-time opportunity, and that is what the government has said. So what is a special advance scheme? Now, earlier it was 4,500, and now this has been increased to about 10,000. So they would be able to take the advance from the government, and they would be able to use this particular money for the festival celebration. Kindly remember, this will be a prepaid RuPay card where all the persons could be able to avail an interest-free advance. And this advance scheme is not limited to one single festival. It can be any number of festivals, and this can be used up until March 31st, 2021. So kindly remember, this will be a one-time opportunity, and earlier what we had was the non-gazetted officers, and now it includes everyone as well. It can be Group A, it can be Group B, it can be Group C, it can be Group D as well. This will be repaid in 10 installments, and this will be taken from the salary going forward, says the Special Festival Advance Scheme. And also remember, when it comes to this particular issue, anyone can spend anywhere, and it need not be always with the GST registered sellers. But when it comes to the travel concession cash voucher scheme, it was only restricted to GST registered sellers, but that is not the same when it comes to the special advance scheme. It is this when it comes to the consumer spending. So what is the significance? The consumer durable sector has welcomed this particular move. Why? Because this happens to be a festival season. So more the sales, more will be the demand, and this will give a boost to the economy. And at the same time, this special festival advance scheme will provide more liquidity to the customers for discretionary spending as well. These are some of the advantages, but there are some concerns as well. That is in reference to the tourism sector. In case this money, which was supposed to be going for the traveling and as part of the travel concession, if it is given in the form of cash, then people would not obviously go, and this means the tourism sector, which is already hit, will be hit further, says the tourism sector. And at the same time, the government announcement will also discourage the travels going forward, is one of the major concerns. Experts also warn that this particular boost is likely to be very temporary, and all the measures taken by the government is inadequate in the present scenario. The next important initiative taken by the government of India is what is called as the capital expenditure. So what is this capital expenditure? Basically, the states in India will be given about 50-year interest-free loan, that which is amounting to about 12,000 crores. So what would happen here? There would be a 50-year loan agreement between the central government and the state government, where 12,000 crores will be dispersed to the state governments in India, and this will be interest free as well. So it is the state governments which would be able to pay back this particular money after 50 years as well, and that is categorized into three different groups. So what are these groups? One, we have the group 1, which is having the northeastern states, which initially will get about 1600 crores, and then we have the states of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, which will get 450 crores each. So what we will have is about 2500 crores. Then we have the group 2 states, which will get about 7500 crores in proportion to the share as per the Finance Commission devolution. So what we have is 10,000 crores. But then we have 12,000 crores in the kitty. So this another 12,000 crores will be in the form of reforms if it is initiated by the state government. So the government of India, as part of the Atmanirbhar package, had introduced some of the norms, rules and regulations that has to be followed by the government of the states. This also includes, for example, implementation of the One Nation One Ration card as well. So in this particular backdrop, if all the state governments in India are able to implement and manage and follow the rules as given by the Atmanirbhar package, then this 2000 will be given to them as part of the performance. This can be used as part of new projects, or it can be used for existing projects, or this money can also be used to pay back the existing dues as well. So kindly remember, when we are speaking about the capital expenditure, what it will have on the economy is the multiplier effect. Why? Because we are developing the infrastructure, building the road, so on and so forth, and all this will help us in the near future, says this particular article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about gene editing technology. We did discuss about this issue in our Sunday CNA. Our focus today would be on the concerns with respect to the gene editing, and at the same time it also speaks about the rules in India, the laws in India, and how we have to bring reformation when it comes to the laws in India. First, let us understand the concern with respect to the gene editing. We have one of the Chinese scientists called as He Jiankui. Who is he? He is a Chinese scientist. It is he who made the first genome edited human babies in the year 2018. And when he came up with this particular genome editing, that is when it resulted in legal and ethical controversies about gene editing. What exactly is his project? Basically, he was a Chinese scientist. What was he up to? He was up to helping the people on the fertility issues. In case there are couple who have fertility issues, and these are the people who are suffering from HIV, he would assist in vitro fertilization and also modifying the DNA as well. That is where he took up an initiative where the embryos were edited of their CCR5 gene in an attempt to confer genetic resistance to the HIV. So what exactly happens? We know for the fact when parents have the HIV, this can also be transmitted to the future generation as well, and that happens with one of the genes called as CCR5. So what does he do? This particular person makes sure that there is editing with respect to the CCR5 such that this particular HIV does not get transmitted to the future generation, especially to the babies. So the children born from this particular couple actually become HIV resistant in the near future. So what is the concern right now? If the babies grow up to have their own children, and in case there are any genetic modifications, this could be easily passed on to the future generations as well, and this could potentially introduce a lasting image to the human race. And at the same time, this genetic editing can also introduce unknown and unintended consequence which can be passed on to the future generation as well. And ultimately it is these kids and their future generation and all the human race which is getting in line with it will be the future sufferers, is what is this article speaking about. In line with this, it also says that the World Health Organization came up with what is called as the Human Genome Editing Register. So what is this register? Basically, this will be a central database that will collect all the information of the clinical trials using human genome editing technology anywhere in any part of the world. In case there is a genome editing that is taking place, this central base will take the idea, will take this particular statistics and feed it into a central base, and this was initiated after this particular controversy. And at the same time, we also have to look at the situation in India when it comes to the gene editing. What are the laws in India when it comes to genome editing? We have the rules for the manufacture, use, import, export and storage of hazardous microorganisms, genetically engineered organisms or cells of the year 1989. This was notified under the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, and they regulate the genetically modified organisms. So these rules are implemented by the Ministry of Environment. These are implemented by the Department of Biotechnology and the state governments as well. So basically, when we are speaking about this implementation, this is about genetically modified organisms. Now when we have to look at the human beings, then we have the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research, which involves the human participants, which was introduced by the Indian Council of Medical Research back in the year 2017. And we also have the Biomedical and Health Research Regulation Bill, which also speaks about gene editing. But all these bills and these particular guidelines speak about gene editing implicitly but does not mention about gene editing explicitly. And as a result, since we have no explicit mention of the term gene editing, there is yet no clarity on how the emerging technologies will be dealt with in India. So what we have is a law lacune when it comes to India. So going forward, what we have to make sure is that given the safety, security and ethical implications of gene editing, there is a growing need to govern gene editing applications, says the author of this article. So it is the right time for India to come up with a specific law to ban any type of gene editing and put guidelines for conducting gene editing research giving rise to the modified organism, says the author of this article. Since we do not have a specific law and does not mention explicitly, we have to define these guidelines with a specific law, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says no penal provision to protect transgenders from assault, says one of the public interest litigation. When you look into the Indian Penal Code, we have section 8 which defines what is called as gender. So what is the gender? The pronoun he and its derivatives are used of any person whether male or female. Kindly look into it. It has only male and the female. Then we have another section called as section 10 which speaks about man and women. The word man denotes a male human being of any age. The word woman denotes a female human being of any age. But what we actually witness when it comes to the Indian Penal Code, or for example any of the criminal laws, what we are missing is the transgender. We have one of the Supreme Court landmark judgments which has also identified the transgender as the third gender when it comes to the gender. But what we witness in IPC is there are no changes. There is only male and female, there is man and a woman, but there is no mention of the transgender persons. And at the same time, there have been number of examples that we can actually look at where transgender persons have also faced sexual abuse as well. When you look at section 354A of the Indian Penal Code, which speaks about outraging the modesty of the women, this again does not include the transgender community. Let's take one of the example. There was a recent incident of a case that happened in Delhi where one of the transgender student from the Delhi University goes up to the police station. She asks that they have to file an FIR because she was sexually abused. But the Delhi police do not take this particular case. They did not file an FIR because there was no provision in the IPC that deal with the transgenders. That is the impact as to how sexual abuse, if it is on the transgenders, are not being accepted by the police stations. Looking into all these issues, there was a public interest litigation that was filed in the Supreme Court of India. This public interest litigation has currently gone on to say that since there is no explicit mention of the transgender in the Indian Penal Code, or when it comes to the sexual violence, this means we are not treating them equally, which is a violation of Article 14. There is discrimination, so there is violation of Article 15 on the basis of gender, and they are not able to lead a life with dignity, so there is violation of 21 as well. So this is a public interest litigation which clearly goes on to say that there is fundamental right violations 14, 15 and 21. So it is asking the Supreme Court to tell the central government that they have to come up with an appropriate order to come up with anti-discrimination bill that penalizes discrimination and harassment on the basis of gender. This is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about TRPs. We have spoken about this article in our last week's CNA as well. What is of importance now is a small update given by the author. What is this small update? We are living in an internet era where everything is revolutionized, everything is digital. When we are considering the TRPs, why consider only 45,000 empaneled households? Instead, what we can actually look at is promoting an idea of internet and digital connectivity. In case we are able to digitally connect the households, we will have more numbers, and that will actually give the numbers of the TRPs. So he gives the example of YouTube, he gives the example of Netflix. How? Let's say for example, the minute we step into the YouTube will obviously know, Google will obviously know which video we are watching, how many minutes we are watching. All this can also be implanted when it comes to the TV programs as well. So what we will have is the right identification instead of taking only the 45,000 numbers, says the author of this article. So internet revolution can also be implemented when it comes to the TV and the channels, which will give the ideal numbers, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand. But for the rest of the analysis, kindly look into our last week's CNA. Now let's look into the next article. This article says American duo win economics Nobel. Kindly remember, we would not be discussing this article today. Why? Because we are expecting more editorials and columns going forward. Once we have them, we will take this article elaborately. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. With reference to Cable Television Network Rules 1994, which of the following programs cannot be carried in the cable service? That which offends against good taste or decency, contains criticism of friendly countries, denigrates children, contains aspersions against the integrity of the president and judiciary. The answer to this is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, no program could be carried in the cable service, and this includes all these important parameters. Kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about Sher Garhi Palace. It is in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Construction of the palace started in 1772 under Shah Alam. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is none. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, it is a former palace in Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir, Kashmir in India. The complex is located in south of the old city at the banks of the Jhelum River. It was the residence of the Afghan rulers and Dogra Maharajas of Jammu and Kashmir. The name Shergahi means Tigress Fortress. The construction of the fortress and palace started in the year 1772 under the Afghan governor Amir Khan Jawansher, and it is not Shah Alam. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, which of the following statements is or correct? It is tasked with implementation, follow-up, support and review of Sendai framework. It is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. Which of the statements are correct? Both the statements are correct. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction earlier was known as International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. The year of formation is 1999, headquartered at Geneva, Switzerland. Also remember, it builds upon the experience gained during 1990 and 1999, which had been designated as the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction. So what does this article currently say? It says that climate change is largely to be blamed, and this has increased the natural disasters in the last 20 years. It gives some of the important statistics. It says that there are about 7,348 major disaster events that occurred between 2000 and 2019, claiming about 1.23 lives, affecting about 4.2 billion people, and costing the global economy about 2.97 trillion. And it also draws a comparison and says the figure far outstrips the 4,212 major natural disasters that was recorded between 1980 and 1999. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Tajikistan is bordered by which of the following countries? Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan and China. The answer to this is 2, 3, 5 and 6. So which are the countries? It includes Afghanistan, China, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, when it comes to Tajikistan, this is a landlocked country. Now let's look into the next practice question. Gado Island is part of which country? Is it Sri Lanka, Maldives, Thailand or Bangladesh? The answer to this is Maldives. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article makes a mention about Maldives. Kindly remember, we have something called as the Gado Island. China was planning to have its military setup in this particular place. It had invested heavily. It had acquired port in this particular area. Why? Because this was a strategically important place for China. So kindly remember, we have the Gado Island where China wanted to set up its military apparatus in this particular region. And at the same time, we also have something called as the Suwadiva Channel or the Huadu Kandu. This is also called as the 1.5 degree channel. Kindly remember, the 1.5 degree channel is in reference to Maldives. It is the broad channel that separates the northern and the central Maldives from the southern atolls. What is so important about it? It is a major shipping and communication passage. China was trying to take control of this 1.5 degree channel, which would allow its submarines unimpeded access into the Indian Ocean. Since China was taking all these steps when it comes to its activities in Maldives, India cannot keep silent. So what does India do? India also comes up with what is called as Greater Mile Connectivity Project. What is this connectivity project all about? This is a project of about 6.7 kilometer bridge causeway network connecting Male, Vilingili, Gulhifalfu and Tilafushi. It is coming after the China-backed $200 million Sinmale Bridge or the China-Maldives Friendship Bridge connecting airport island of Hulhule with the capital was inaugurated. So in the past, since China has taken all these steps, India currently has taken this particular project, which is about development of 6.7 kilometer bridge that will connect Male, which happens to be the capital, with 3 other important cities. So kindly remember, Gulhifalfu is one of the important port and Tilafushu happens to be one of the industrial zones. And to implement this project, India had already announced a package of about 500 million, out of which now the Exim Bank of India and Maldives Finance Ministry have signed an agreement for 400 million in Male. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's let's look into the next practice question. Which amongst the following provided a common factor for the tribal insurrection in India in the 19th century? Introduction of a new system of land revenue and taxation of tribal products. This is wrong. Influence of foreign religious missionary in tribal areas. This is wrong. Rise of a large number of moneylenders, traders, and revenue farmers as middlemen in tribal areas. This is wrong. The complete disruption of the old agrarian order of the tribal communities. Yes, this is the right answer. So the answer to this is D. Now let's look into the mains practice question. What are the various steps taken by the government of India to stimulate consumer demand and boost the economy in an effort to fight the slowdown due to coronavirus pandemic? Delhi pollution is not only due to anthropogenic activities but is partly because of the nature of its topography. Suggest measures to mitigate the air pollution. So please write both the answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism. If you liked our initiative, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.